Hey everyone, I'm Jack Nations coming to you from Drive Social Media, St. Louis, Missouri. Today we're going to take a look back at one of my personal favorite Workshop Week presenters, Erika Ayers, the first CEO of Barstool Sports and the author of Nobody Cares About Your Career. Erika's no-nonsense attitude, confidence, and business sense made her a perfect fit for our program. Her message about sticking to your authentic self had staying power and will be referenced by our teams in the foreseeable future. After her keynote, Erika was kind enough to stay with our team at Drive Social Media in St. Louis, Missouri for a fireside chat hosted by yours truly. So sit back and enjoy this presentation with Erika.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm assuming, are people here familiar with Barstool Sports? Okay, that's great. Who's your favorite? Big Cat. Yeah, that makes sense. What about Riggs? Riggs is from St. Louis. Riggs people or not Riggs people? All right, Riggs people. Chicks in the Office is amazing. So what I'm excited to talk about is being authentic. And I thought this last presentation was amazing. I was like dozed off in like great commercials. I love commercials. The problem with brands, I think, is that it's hard to get people to watch your fucking commercials unless they're that good. And so what I want to talk about is how you can be authentic, how you can use the internet, how we've been authentic, what I think that means today, and how I think you can apply that. We'll do a Q&A. Any questions you have are great. I'm pretty much an open book, and we'll just jump into it. All right. So one of the things that, I'll give you an example at Barstool, which is one of the things that Dave Portnoy and I always talk about is when we were starting out together, which was in 2016, the business had been around since 2004. And we were starting to go up against ESPN and NBC and CBS and kind of the mainstream sports media people. And people were looking at us, and at the time I thought that maybe we could mainstream and we could look like what everybody else wanted. And the reality was we couldn't, and it was a super painful lesson, and I'll get into that in a second. But what we did see was that what the big media companies were doing we're having meetings with a lot of people in a conference room, and the subject is like, how do we get more authentic? Like, how do we be more relatable? How can we feel more real? And what we always said was that essentially, if you have to have a meeting on a calendar in a conference room about being authentic, you are never, ever, ever going to be authentic. So I love this quote from Malcolm Gladwell. We're too much in awe of those who succeed. We're far too dismissive of those who fail. And most of all, we become much too passive. I think one of the dangers of the internet right now is just passivity, where there is so much to watch, there's so much to look at, there's so much sameness, quite honestly, that it's easy to get lulled into that doom scroll of FOMO of what everybody else is doing, or sameness in trying to look just like them. And one of the things that I think is really important right now is to figure out what is it about you that makes you authentic, what is it about the brands that you work with that make them authentic, and what is it about the people you work with that makes them authentic, that you can relate to, that you can build on, that you can challenge, and that you can make something together. When we think about Barstool, authentic 24/7 and unapologetic is the way that we describe who we are and what we do. And I would say every person to a T at Barstool Sports, what's made us so successful, whether it's Call Her Daddy or Chicks in the Office or Foreplay or Big Cat or Dave, is that they're inherently authentic. They are unendingly or unerringly unapologetic, and we are a 24/7 company. And that's the name of the game, which is to be relevant right now, you have to be 24/7. And authenticity always wins. What I did is took a look at people who I think are incredibly authentic, and what is it about them, and what is it we can learn from them, and why is it that they resonate? So is anyone here familiar with Barry Weiss? Barry Weiss is a good friend of mine. Barry Weiss is kind of like the Dave Portnoy of opinion and news journalism. She is a Jewish woman who is a lesbian, and is not ultra conservative, but fairly conservative. She got a job at the New York Times, and she said, Trump is going to win the election. The New York Times is missing it. You're missing it, you're missing it, you're missing it. And she was very controversial at the Times because exactly to the last presentation, she stood against what the agenda was, which was fairly liberal, which was talking about the Democratic politics, and was assuring that Hillary was going to win the election. Barry has since gone out on her own. She is the single most successful person on Substack. I think she's a third of Substack's traffic and audience. She is an incredible force. She's building her own media company, but she is incredibly authentic. She says it like she sees it. She owns who she is. She's proud of her point of view. She's not afraid to push others to the limits, and that's what makes her likable. It's what makes her unlikable, and it's what makes her a must-watch. Dave, I probably don't even need to go into how Dave is authentic. Dave is the most honest person I've ever met, to a fault, where you're like, please don't say that to that person. I know you're thinking it, you don't have to say it. Dave will say it, and that's what makes Dave so beloved, and it's also what makes him so authentic. He is not trying to be liked. And I think one of the biggest dangers, whether you're at work or you're building a brand or you're working with a partner or you're trying to achieve something, this desire to be liked hurts your authenticity. Because if you're trying to be liked, most often you're going to mimic what you see or what you look at or what you think somebody else wants. And what I love about Dave in this case is Dave does not care if he's liked. And Dave's disdain of the establishment, I would say, and his belief in himself, his honesty, and his, he could give two licks about being liked. That is what has made him so successful. Dolly Parton is another great one, where Dolly, came up the country music establishment. She has a lot of great quotes herself about authenticity. She frankly just played dumb, where she pretended she didn't understand business. She was insanely successful at business, but she was always authentic to who she was, how she looked, what she had to say, the way she wrote her songs, the way she sang them, and the way she managed her career was inherently her own, and that's what makes her authentic. Does anyone know Wallow and Gilly? Yeah, $1 Million Worth of Game. I love $1 Million Worth of Game. $1 Million Worth of Game is like my biggest bet right now at Barstool Sports. Wallow and Gilly are incredible. Wallow spent, I think, 27 total years in prison. He was in juvie. He then did armed robbery, went to prison before there was the internet, before cell phones existed. He got out 3 years ago. Gilly is his cousin and was like a one-hit wonder rap star. He probably wouldn't appreciate me calling him that, but he was. And they have a podcast called $1 Million Worth of Game. They talk about music, they talk about culture, they talk about lifestyle, they talk about living your best life, which is what GAME stands for. It's a whole acronym to how they talk to their community and their culture. But they are so unapologetic about who they are. They own where they come from. They own the mistakes they've made. They laugh about the learnings and experiences they've had along the way. And how do I go back? And because they're so authentic, they have a cult following. They're the #1 music podcast in the world, and they really don't even talk about music, which is kind of brilliant in and of itself. Elon Musk, I think that one goes without saying. Elon's very, very authentic, I think sometimes to his detriment. And then comedy. I think one of the interesting things, and this is the space I come from and we play in, is comedy is really important because comedy lets you push the boundaries. It lets you test the edge. It lets you touch things that are uncomfortable. It's important that you can do that because in laughing about something, one, people remember it 10 times more than if you don't laugh. But what it also does is it makes things resonate and it makes people think while being entertained. And so these are people who I think are in culture, who are in media, who are in music and entertainment, who really embody authenticity. What's also really interesting is that it's easier than ever to grow a following if you are authentic, right? Joe Rogan, great example of this. I think the single highest paid person on Spotify. He has made the Joe Rogan Experience a juggernaut show. One, he's an incredible interviewer, but two, he's very rooted in who he is, in the MMA space, in the meat eating space, in the lifestyle space, in the counterculture space. But he has used podcasting, which is also what we've used at Barstool Sports, as a medium that's free, where he can broadcast his point of view anywhere. Barry, I talked about, she's using a newsletter subscription on Substack to share her voice and to project her authenticity and her message. Elon uses Twitter. Now he owns Twitter. I mean, that's creating a whole thing in and of itself. Dave, I would say, uses the internet. What's interesting about Dave is when Dave first got on the internet, which was, let's say, probably 2006, 2007, he used to sit on a story for weeks. If he saw something weird happening in Boston or there was a funny media story, he could sit on it for weeks, if not months, and he blogged it when he was ready. The pace of the internet has changed so fast, and it is so massive, there's so much to keep up on, that one of the biggest secrets to Dave's success is how consistent he is on the internet and how frequent he is on the internet. Taylor Swift, I added her the other day to this because, did anyone watch the viral video about her on the Ellen DeGeneres show? Did anyone watch this? Do you know what I'm talking about? It was crazy. What's that, Emily, how do you pronounce that last name? Ratajkowski. She's a whole thing of herself, but I watched it, and what I thought was so interesting about this is how Ellen DeGeneres, so for anybody who didn't watch it, basically Taylor Swift goes on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Ellen DeGeneres, in my opinion, highly inauthentic, right? She's projecting this likable image, a very friendly image, and she's actually kind of nasty, right? You see that in how, the stories on her workplace. But when Taylor went to go be interviewed by her, and anybody who has watched the video, keep me honest, she kind of belittles Taylor. She reduces everything about Taylor Swift to who Taylor Swift dated. Is that fair? Okay. So and that's kind of demoralizing. And Taylor Swift's uncomfortable, and she's like, well, I'm bigger than a series of celebrities I've dated, and you're making me uncomfortable. But what I think is interesting about that is really two things. One is Taylor Swift's authentic about how in her music, in her lyrics, she's also authentic in how she monetizes them and distributes them. The fight with Scooter Braun probably wasn't the smartest move, but was brilliant in hindsight. It didn't feel like the smartest move. She was going up against the establishment. But also, I think one of the things that happens when you're authentic is people try to belittle you. That happens to us all day long. That happens to me all day long. That's what happens if you're out there and you're trying to be authentic. All these people have been belittled, maybe for good reasons, maybe not for good reasons. But I thought that was interesting about Taylor. Donald Trump, like whether you like Trump or hate Trump, it really doesn't matter. I think what Trump has done and did, I don't really see him doing it in this election, but media companies are grossly struggling for eyeballs, right? Nobody's watching cable television anymore. Nobody's watching television, really, period, outside of live sports. Fox News and CNN and all the other cable talking heads need shit to talk about. And Donald Trump played into that in a way that was absolutely brilliant because he just gave people ridiculous, outrageous, one thing's worse than the next, day in and day out for cable news to talk about. So all of these people are using different forms of media to express their point of view, to share who they are. And in doing so, I think are very, very authentic. The other thing with all these guys or people is that all of them are flawed. And that's the other trick when you're authentic is you're going to be flawed because humans are flawed and people are going to see your flaws. And I think that's one of the hardest hurdles for people and brands and organizations and celebrities to get over is that if you want to put yourself out there and you want to put yourself out there as a person who has authenticity, there's going to be some cost to that and you're not going to appear perfect. So these are great examples. We talked about Elon Musk, Chrissy Teigen, perfect example. You're out there, you're sharing who you are, you want to be famous, you want eyeballs, you want followers, you want likes, you want a business. People are going to go into your past, figure out what you've done, and make fun of you for it. We had this happen with Barstool Van Talk. Did anyone here watch Barstool Van Talk? It was a great, great episode. Anyways, got canceled after one episode on ESPN because we had kind of a clash. Who we were didn't really fit with who ESPN wanted to be. They thought we were very controversial. But at the end of the day, we fought them on that cancellation. And what ended up happening was we had a show. It was on 1 a.m. on a secondary network. It was on ESPN2. It got canceled because Chaps, does anyone here know Chaps? Okay, Chaps, also very authentic, but Chaps had a really ill-timed series of blogs. Does anyone know what I'm about to say? Do you know these blogs? All right, so Chaps had this thing for a couple of years where he would blog pictures of pumpkins and other gourds, and they looked like genitalia or butts and such. And he had one that he posted the morning that Van Talk ran, and John Skipper, who was running ESPN at the time, went and read the blog and was like, these people are misogynistic, and it was like, then the whole thing blew up. And it really was, chaps did this, it was all sorts of genitalia, not just female genitalia. But anyways, so authenticity comes with consequences because people are not gonna like your brand of authenticity, and you have to be willing to own that. What happened in the case of Barstool Van Talk is we didn't make really any money from it. We wouldn't have made much money from it, and we wouldn't have gotten a lot of eyeballs for it. But by us talking about our cancellation on ESPN, we got hundreds of millions of media impressions, and we kind of came on the map as like, who's this company going up against ESPN? So not only did we own our authenticity, we owned the consequence of our authenticity, and we turned it into an advantage. In the case of Musk, there's a whole bunch of things going on with his Twitter and what's happening with the stock price. But what I think is interesting about him is he's alienating his own buying audience. So the Twitter Musk and the Tesla Musk aren't really congruous, right? Tesla buyers are like affluent people on the East Coast who are liberal, kind of elite. They want the brand and the perception of Tesla. He's out ranting about the right, this, that, and the other thing, conspiracy theory on Twitter, which doesn't really match up. And now you see Tesla buyers kind of in a pickle of like, do they like Musk? Do they not like Musk? What does the Tesla brand stand for as a result of their founder? So the other piece with authenticity is it can have an impact on the entire ecosystem that you come from. It's also riskier than ever. You have to understand where you play, how you play, what you say, and what the consequences of that can be, right? When you think about the algorithm, and you guys spend, I'm sure, an insane amount of time thinking about this, we spend a lot of time thinking about this, is what does the algorithm want? And yes, the algorithm wants authenticity, but in the case, at least in our world, on Facebook or Instagram, they prefer some type of authenticity over others, right? And what's becoming interesting is what you're seeing is that the algorithm isn't necessarily a very pure thing. There's humans behind the algorithm. There's agendas behind the algorithm. It also can be as simple as, I was thinking about this on the way here today, which is we had a dismal Black Friday. So we always do big Black Friday sale at Barstool. We do, I think, probably 30% of our merch business between midnight on Thanksgiving to Monday of Cyber Monday. We had a dismal Black Friday. The reason we had a dismal Black Friday is that what we used as our marketing vehicle, especially on Instagram, was photos. And Instagram doesn't want photos. Instagram wants reels because they gotta compete with TikTok. So if you're gonna post photos, not only do you not go anywhere, you actually get repressed because you're posting too many photos and you're not posting videos. So what's also interesting as you think about authenticity for your clients and your partners is where and how you put that message and the format that it lives in is actually going to be almost more important than the message itself. The other thing that's amazing about influence and amazing about authenticity is that people who are highly authentic generally can be controversial. People like them, you have people who don't like them, but it is incredibly motivating. I think one of the biggest things about Barstool Sports, I can remember sitting with Dave in 2015, and we talked about the reality show. And what we said was, we're going to have a business, or we think we can have a business that is also a reality show. And the vision when we moved all the bloggers to New York in the summer of 2016 was that the entire office was wired with cameras and mics and whatever stupid stuff people were doing all day, and they did, an inane amount of stupid things, would all be caught on camera, and it would help show the journey of the business and the company that we were creating and the brands that we were bringing to life. That has enabled us to do incredible things. So the Barstool Fund, we launched that over the holidays in 2021. We raised almost $50 million for small businesses. We only could do that because we were authentic and because we had a following and because we had people buy into the journey. And I think that's one of the hard things right now especially with social media where it just looks like the perfect finished package at the end. And it's really the messy journey that makes people love you as humans, as partners, as colleagues, as clients, as brands. It's the journey that is interesting. And that's really what we've harnessed. If you look at, this is Greta, she's a human rights activist, like her story, following her journey, seeing her grow from, a 10, 11-year-old girl to a 17-year-old, watching that play out on Twitter, looking at how she relates to global leaders and trolls is interesting. And you either have affinity for Greta or you hate Greta, it doesn't really matter, but you're watching her and it's interesting. And it's interesting because you're seeing the progression and the journey. You look at what's happening in the Ukraine and, the president of the Ukraine is a former comedian. And he's using his platform, he's using media to show a journey and a story to get global support for a war, for potentially what could be a world war. So it's interesting when you think about authenticity and you think about the journey, showing your flaws, showing your progress, showing your failings will ultimately help people relate to you and buy into you and can be a massive force for good. Democratization of expression, I probably don't need to tell anyone here about this at all, but this is something that is insanely prevalent. It is so easy to make content now. It is so easy to broadcast yourself. But what's happening is that there is so much broadcasting, whether it's TikTok, it's on Snapchat, it's on Instagram, and it also just looks the same. There's so much sameness. I get served, I don't know why, like 70 face contouring videos. I just get face contouring videos and I'm like, God, I think it's like, I don't like my nose and I just get face contouring videos, but they're all the same. And the point here that I'm trying to make is that, and it really dovetails on the last conversation, which I thought was brilliant, is you have to stand out. You have to push against something. When people are zigging, you've got to figure out how to zag, which is tough. And you can't figure that out in a conference room. You have to feel it. But buying into the norm and the things that have the highest amount of frequency and the greatest amount of sameness, that's not great for people as individuals, and it's certainly not great for brands. AI is interesting. How many people here have used OpenAI? I mean, it's amazing. I literally wrote this speech on OpenAI in like 6 seconds, and I was like, Jesus, this is like gonna put people out of business. But what's fascinating is that the computers are coming, right? And they're going to write copy, and they're gonna write speeches, and they're going to write term papers. Like, I could have used this in college, like you read about. But what's interesting is that AI is gonna change, as you think about your jobs, AI is gonna change your jobs in crazy ways that I don't think any of us foresee. But what it's going to mean is that the humans in the world are going to need to be thinkers. You're going to have points of view and opinions and creativity and risk-taking and illogical, whether it's illogical language or illogical thinking or illogical behavior. But this is going to change how content is created and what is created. And I think that's just important to think about as you think about your careers, as you think about your jobs. If you do a menial job that a computer can do, a computer will do that job. So how do you think about evolving what you do and how you do it so it is more creative, it has more thinking, it can be more personalized? I thought I would talk about Barstool for a second and just give you guys some examples. So I don't think I need to tell you about who we are or why we're authentic, but what's really interesting to me about Barstool Sports is I think we are the future of media. I think any media company in the future is going to look like Barstool. And the reason I say this is that we understand how to produce content very, very cheaply. I think the internet has challenged advertising so much because the costs are different, the economics are different, right? A creative agency can charge a lot for a 30-second spot. It's really hard to charge a lot for a static banner. And so the need to create content that can be insanely prolific, where you can put it in many, many, many places, and you can produce it very, very, very cheaply, is going to be important in the future of media. The second thing that's really important is being on every platform. So last month, we produced 50,000 original videos by hand. So we have 400 people at Barstool Sports, we have 100 content creators, and 120 editors and producers. We produce 50,000 pieces of content. And we put those every orifice of the internet that we could find. And that's what we're good at, is understanding where the places on the internet are where we can put content. What's also really interesting as it relates to media is that we were very early on podcasting. So when we started podcasting in 2016, we launched Pardon My Take, KFC Radio, and the Dave Portnoy Show. They didn't have any competition. Like, there really wasn't, ESPN wasn't really into podcasting, the big sports companies weren't into podcasting. There were a few influencers podcasting, but not much beyond that. So then we created Chiclets, and then we created Foreplay, and then we created, now we have 90 podcasts. The reality is, it's not that long later, it's 2023, podcasting, in my opinion, is kind of dead. And when we think about an hour-long show at this point, we're not thinking about audio, we're thinking about social. And that hour-long show has to be broken down into 60 to 120 clips. And what we're thinking about is we think about our authenticity and how we tell our stories and where we tell our stories. They've got to play out in 5 to 30-second clips. And that's also what's really interesting, which is that's how media is going to play out. Nobody has the attention span to watch the whole thing anymore, to listen to the whole thing anymore. People just consume on social in that scroll. So making that moment work is critical to growing a brand on social media. The other thing is, going against the grain can help you. When I got to Barstool Sports, everyone was like, oh God, like, you're making a mistake. This is career suicide. You're never going to work again, which may be right. But what I saw immediately is, like, these guys have legitimately offended everyone. Like, everyone. Like, you put any sector, group, religion, race, gender, you name it, these guys have offended them. And I had to make the decision of I could either spend, the next 3 years of my life apologizing to everyone for what they've done, or we could lean into it. And I was like, I don't like apologizing, so I'm not going to do that. But it also wouldn't have worked because the apology really wasn't genuine. And I don't think apologizing, the world is so polarizing right now that a fake apology isn't really going to net you a strong result. And so what we decided to do was to lean into the controversy. John Feidelberg wrote a bunch of blogs against cyclists. He hates cyclists. The cycling community comes after John Feidelberg. KFC offends, is one of the most offensive people alive, offends everyone. In this case, it's the blind community. Alex Cooper, who we launched Call Her Daddy with her, she's now at Spotify. She was talking about sex in a raunchy way that it also offended most everyone, but we captured every college kid in this country who listened to that thing on every Wednesday. So we leaned into that, and it really helped propel and grow our brand organically in a way that we didn't have to pay for. And that is really, I think, going to be the future, which is how do you glom on to a storyline, a topic, a narrative, a subject, a person, and how can you be constant and 24/7 with an opinion and a perspective that can play out on social media of how you think about that person, that topic, or that thing. And that's how we've really grown our business. Our approach to authenticity. This is Frank the Tank. Do we have Frank the Tank fans? Sorry, I love Frank the Tank. I love Frank the Tank. So Frank the Tank, for anybody who doesn't know, I think he was a clerk in the court system in New Jersey, and he was very mad at New Jersey Transit because he couldn't get to the Mets game. We hired him and he had this rant that went viral on local news, and we hired him the next day. What we love about people like Frank is when you go to a normal company or a media company or an agency, you're not hiring Frank, probably. Frank is crazy. He knows how to clerk at the post office, and we're teaching Frank how to make content, but he's actually electric. We really just let Frank be Frank and put the cameras and the mics on Frank. But diversity in thought and topics is really, really important. When I got to Barstool, these guys knew how to blog. Dave texted them once a year, and then they knew how to blog every 30 minutes. That's basically how Barstool was run. And what we did was Dave and I just opened the door to really, really weird people. And we said, have at it. We didn't pay them a lot of money, and we were like, let's see what you can do. Alex Cooper, when we first hired her, made under $100,000. She now has an $80 million deal with Spotify. This is like amazing. So we take a lot of bets at very low cost to see how they work, and we let people be themselves. We don't mess with their creatives. So that, I think, is a really big thing. If you're in an agency, you're in a creative environment, which you obviously all are, micromanaging creative is just a disaster. And what we do is we really make sure that we never, ever, ever touch somebody's creative. And I think that can be almost counterintuitive. In my job, it makes me kind of nervous, where I'm like, I don't know what these guys are going to say or what these girls are going to do. But not messing with people's creative motivates people to make more creative. Having people's back, this is Francis Ellis. Francis got into it probably a month ago. He had a hot mic and he was trashing Fox News and everybody came after Francis. But we have people's backs when they get in trouble, because the reality is, if you're going to be authentic and you're going to share an opinion and you have a point of view, you're going to step in it. If the camera's on you, anyone in this room, you're going to step in it. And so making sure you understand that people are fallible and having their backs in that moment is really, really critical. What's interesting in this case is, is anyone following the Dana White ESPN thing? Which I think is fascinating. I'm like riveted by it. But what's interesting about the Dana White thing is that, UFC has a $1.5 billion partnership with ESPN. Dana White and his wife are in Cabo, they're smacking each other around. It's not great, it's bad. But nobody in sports media is talking about it, nobody. And last week, there was a bunch of reporters who were like, hey, we're not really down with this, but the edict from ESPN is that we don't talk about it. And I think that there's a difference in having someone's back and not talking about it, but it's inauthentic to not talk about controversy when controversy happened. In Francis's case, everybody in the entire network talked about it all the time. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. Dave and I went to the White House in July of 2021, and people at Barstool loved it, and people at Barstool absolutely hated it. And the night we got back from the White House, we were trending twice. We trended for Dave, and all the people who loved the Trump interview were rallying for Dave having the interview, and Big Cat was so mad that Big Cat was trending right underneath it. And that's authenticity. People loved it, people hated it, everyone had a point of view, and it was a conversation that was playing out all over Twitter, all over social media. That's what the world is like now. So if you want your brand to be relevant and you want to be part of the conversation, one, you have to understand people are gonna like you and people are gonna hate you. But embracing that debate is really, really important. And having people's backs when they mess up, which is a little bit of a separate topic. But bringing our fans along for the journey. I talked about this earlier, but this is Grace and Brianna Chicken Fry. Do we have fans of Grace and Brianna here? You love everything, huh? I love that. I'll take you home with me. But what's also incredible, not really, I'm just kidding. What's really incredible is what Brianna has done. We hired Brianna. She was a college sophomore in Ohio, and she was making TikToks. And we were like, oh, you're kind of interesting. Do you want to intern with us? And she was like, yeah, I'd love to intern with you. And she interned with us. Grace is her best friend from high school. And Brianna created a sweatshirt that said hungover on it. And we sold 50,000 sweatshirts in one night. And we were like, this girl, she's talking about like drinking Dunkin' Donuts and getting trashed, has a lot of fans. She's hit on something that resonates. She now has a podcast. They do a live tour. She talks about mental health. She talks about drinking. She talks about college life. She talks really about a whole bunch of things. But she's brought her fans along for the journey. And the reason her fans and Grace's fans love them, Grace fought in Rough and Rowdy with us, which is our pay-per-view amateur boxing event, is that they're real. And they are who they are, and they're flawed, and they make mistakes, and they screw up, and they do great things, and they cry, and they laugh. But bringing fans along for the journey is an incredible way, is one of the most incredible things about being public and being authentic. And then you have to be not afraid to fuck up. Like, we fuck up all the time. Like, publicly, obviously, I'm sure everyone who follows Barstool sees it. but we make a lot of mistakes. And the biggest thing that I see is if you're willing to work hard and you're willing to try things, not everything is going to be successful. And to be honest, if everything is successful, you're really not working that hard or trying that much. We screw up all the time. Barstool Gold is something we launched. Was anyone here a Barstool Gold member? Probably not, because it was a disaster. But we spent a lot of time and we spent a lot of money. We built a subscription product, and it was at a point in time where the Chernin Group, who were our investors, were like, you guys need to get serious. You need to build subscription. And we did it against our better judgment. So I would really say there's two things here. It's like you have to trust your gut. The reason Barstool Gold didn't work was that it was inauthentic. Our talent are narcissists. They love fans, they love controversy, they love being on the internet, they love followers, they love likes, they're highly, highly prolific. They love the attention. And when you go behind a paywall, it's way deeper attention, but it's not as conversational. It doesn't go viral. It's definitely not social. And building a product that was about exclusivity and a walled garden versus being out everywhere was completely antithetical to who we were. And that was a massive mistake. That was a huge mistake that we made, but we learned from it and we've never done it again, and we kind of shrug and we're like, we shouldn't have done that. We won't do it again. But we weren't afraid to try, and we weren't afraid to say it didn't work. And I think sometimes it's actually hard where people pretend they know all the answers and they've got it all right, which means you don't ever want to try anything. But then they don't want to admit when something totally sucked. And I think being open and ready to admit when things suck is a great way to grow. Taking big risks, we take big risks all the time, which is partly why we screw up all the time. We used to call it the Barstool difference, which was, I don't know if anyone has followed us for a long time, but like the audio never worked or the video didn't go on or our shows started late. Taking risks is important because taking risk means you're pushing your own boundaries. And in our case, we're bringing new fans along when we go to those boundaries and those new places. So we're doing live sports. I think no one, especially me 6 years ago, would have said, we're going to be broadcasting live sports credibly. Like, no one would have said that. No one would have probably said that a year ago, but that's the game that we're in now. We do reality shows. We did the Arizona Bowl. Did anyone watch the Arizona Bowl? It was great, right? Did you like it? I loved it. It was a great game. But anyways, take big risks. It's a big chance to fall on your face, but really incredible things can happen. And if you are bringing people along for the journey, like I'd mentioned, and you're showing progression and you're trying things, you can have an incredible ROI. You know, we have 200 million fans across Barstool Sports. I'm sure people here drink High Noons, I would guess, right? Yeah. You love noon. Okay. High Noon is like a juggernaut runaway train, in large part due to Dave Portnoy, because he brought people along for the journey, because people want to tune in, because he's authentic, because he has influence. Pink Whitney is a top 3 flavored vodka in the world. We do a ton of products. We work with a ton of brands, which we'll talk about. But there's an ROI to authenticity as humans and as people, but also in business. The last presentation was amazing, which is advertising or entertainment that makes you feel things is incredible. Like the Kiss video, like you have chills. That song is incredible. You could put that song on like a cheeseburger commercial and everyone here would be eating cheeseburgers. But it has an ROI, making people feel things. And there's different ways to make people feel things. You can be biblical or be beautiful and anthemic, or you can be real. And in our case, we're real, and that has an incredible ROI. One of the topics here, and we'll zip through this, is being authentic at work. First of all, just work somewhere that values authenticity. You'd be surprised, like, I can't stand Sheryl Sandberg, which is probably not a nice thing to say, but I think she's inauthentic. I think she's like a droid and has a lot of other droids that work at Facebook that look exactly the same way. Like, Facebook to me doesn't seem like a place and a brand that values authenticity. Now, they would probably reject that and say that's unequivocally untrue, but that's what I believe in their brand. So if you work here or you work anywhere, be in a place, be in a team, be a team leader, be a manager that values authenticity. Be curious, ask questions. Have a vision for yourself and your team. I'm in the process of writing a book, and one of the chapters in the book is Can your boss's boss explain what you do? And you would be surprised, at Barstool Sports, most people's boss's boss can't explain what they do. And it's because people aren't showing up to work, whether you're like the TPS report person, or you're a trafficking person, or you work in FP&A, or you're a sales guy. Explaining and having a vision for what you do and knowing why that matters and why your boss's boss should care about it, it seems so stupid, but you'd be so surprised at how few people have a vision for themselves and have a vision for themselves at work and can articulate it in a way that someone who does not work close to you day to day can understand and articulate not only your value, but your vision and your impact. So I think that's critical. Execute well and consistently. This is critical. If you can't execute, your vision doesn't matter. You're not going to move up, and you're not going to perform well. This goes back to my other lesson, which is admit when you screw up. This is also hard for people. It's hard for people to show vulnerability. It's hard to be like, oh, I completely dogged that sales pitch, or we blew up that campaign, or my creative didn't work and it didn't resonate. Just the fact of saying that will make your client love you more, it makes your boss love you more, it makes your peers respect you more. So many people try to hide when they screw up, when everybody knows you screwed up. Seems very simple, but the more you can do this, the more authentic you can be at work. Don't let people walk all over you. This happens all the time at Barstool. So much of how we work right now is over Zoom, and it's impersonal, or it manifests on Slack. Like, it's not face-to-face, it's not human. And as a result, people let other people walk all over them. And that's not authentic either, because you're just being meek, even though you may feel differently, or you may want to do things differently, or you may have ideas that could change how you do things altogether. Not letting people walk all over you at work is a great way to start being authentic about what you care about and how you think things can be done. And then listening. Like, I think this one also seems really, really simple. But I see it a lot at Barstool. You know, we've grown from 12 people 6 years ago to 420 people. And there's a lot of talkers at Barstool Sport, and to be honest, very few listeners. So we're trying to listen more, because listening really helps you learn. And if you can listen more, it will help you understand better what people are looking for, what they want. Obviously, you can understand what they're saying, but what's more important is what they're not saying, which helps you understand what they care about, where their authenticity is, and how you can deliver for it. And then finally, to Dolly, find out who you are and do it on purpose. And that's all I got for you. Does that work? All right.
Good job, Erika.
All
righty. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Service here is incredible. All righty, we're switching it up a little bit. I'm going to ask all the questions because I haven't got to ask any all day. So I want to start. You just mentioned how when you started in 2016, right, there were 12 people. What made you leave being the CMO of AOL, right? Huge company, very successful, took a risk on what was essentially a startup with a bunch of goofy sports fans from Boston and a couple from Chicago.
A bunch of things. So I had spent my whole career really in advertising. I started my career in advertising. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and then I was like, ugh, I definitely don't want to be a lawyer. And then I moved to advertising and kind of meandered around a bunch of agencies. Got a big break when I went to go work for Microsoft, and my dream was to be a CMO. That was all I wanted. I just wanted to be a CMO. It was all I wanted. I was like, if I can just get to be a CMO. And I worked my ass off. I worked basically my 20s and 30s away. But when I got the CMO job at AOL, it sucked. I hated it. Like, I hated my job. And the reason is that I was kind of burnt out on being a marketer, and I also was like, I felt like I was putting lipstick on a pig. I don't know if anyone here ever feels like that, but I'm like, this thing is a dog, and I've got to like zhuzh it up and make it look great. And it felt disingenuous, kind of to the authenticity theme. And I was unhappy. And it was a hard thing because I was like, this is what I'm supposed to want. Like, I worked so hard for this. I got this. I have the business card. but it's not making me happy. It's not fulfilling. I'm not moving forward. I looked at my time at AOL, and I always measure myself where every 6 months, I don't want to be doing the same thing I did 6 months ago, period. And so at AOL, I was like, I'm going on like 2 years, and like I'm still doing the same thing. And so I left, and I created a startup in music, actually, with Justin Bieber. And I modeled it on Barstool. I was a Barstool fan, and what I loved about what Dave Portnoy did is it was around Deflategate, and I was like, Tom Brady's getting screwed, and Dave went to the NFL presser and got in all sorts of trouble, and wrote. There was a Saturday morning in August. It was like August 14th. And he wrote this really long blog about Deflategate and Tom Brady and his journey, and it had typos, and it was like so poorly written, but it was like so compelling and captivating. And at the bottom of it, he had a free Brady t-shirt ad, and I bought 5. And I was like, this is exactly what Justin Bieber should be doing. We were launching the Purpose album, and Purpose, I think, is for anyone who's a Bieber fan, like I love the Purpose album. I think it's an amazing album. And there's a lot of great lyrics in that album. And I'm like, if Bieber could make t-shirts of Purpose lyrics, like that's a whole new line of revenue for Bieber. So I modeled the whole thing on Barstool. And then heard through the grapevine, I went to raise money that Dave was looking for a CEO, that the Chernin Group had invested. And I dropped everything and went to, basically stalked Dave and went to meet him in a coffee shop. And he wasn't like, this was pre-Club Dave. So Dave was in like pleated khaki pants with like an embroidered belt, and which he probably won't like to talk about. But and we had this vision for this company of what it could be, and they had been through a really long line of candidates, and they're all guys, and they're all business school grads, and they were all like, oh, this is everything wrong with Barstool. Like you're gonna have to change. You're gonna have to change. You're gonna have to change. And I was like, I don't think you have to change really much of anything. And that's how I got the job. And it was a huge risk. I took a massive pay cut, and I worked 24/7 for 6 years on it, but I will never love a job the way I've loved this job.
That's awesome. That's really great. You talk about putting lipstick on a pig, right? Which is, I hate to admit it, but I'm sure some of us feel that way sometimes. But at the same time, when I consume Barstool content, like, your guys won't even say the name of a competitor of one of your advertisers. Like, they won't say Venmo if Cash App is sponsoring it. How do you balance the authenticity with just going that hard into ride or dying for your client?
Yeah. Look, like I grew up in the agency world, and I actually loved the agency world. I think it's the best apprenticeship. I think it's the best apprenticeship. If you are willing to work hard and be uncomfortable and screw up, you can move up your career so fast in an agency. I love that. We're pretty ride or die. So when I got to Barstool, we had 3 advertisers, and one of the things I didn't like about Yahoo and AOL and Microsoft is everybody's just kind of shit on the salespeople, and they really shit on the advertisers. Like, the editorial people were too good for ads. And I was like, I hate that. Like, these people pay your salary. Like, you have some respect for the advertisers who really fund our entire business, and have respect for salespeople. I think salespeople have an insanely hard job that does not get a lot of respect. It's hard to be a salesperson.
Yeah.
Look, the salespeople have to pick up the phone and call strangers and ask for money. Like, I really can't think of anything I'd rather not do in a day than call a stranger and ask for money, and that's what they do for you. So, like, you got to give up for the salespeople. But one of the things that I really didn't want at Barstool is I kind of contradicted myself, but I didn't want church and state. I didn't want the ad people and the editorial people to feel that one was better than the other. And the message I made really clear, when I got to Barstool, we had, I think, $1.5 million in the bank. And Dave really had no idea who worked for Barstool, if we paid them or not. Like, it was a disaster. We owned horses, and he paid people by personal checks, and there wasn't a P&L, and it was like, if he was gambling, then it was a disaster. So long story short, we didn't have a lot of money. So I was like, basically, look, motherfuckers, like we're gonna crush it for our ad partners because that's the only way the lights are on and we're staying in business. And that's how we set the tone from day one. The second thing we did was build a commerce business because, as you guys know, advertisers are fickle and they can be difficult and they kind of like go whichever way the wind blows, which is annoying. But I created a way bigger commerce business. Dave always had a t-shirt business and a commerce business, but we really like put the gas on that because these guys were so volatile that I didn't want us to go out of business because somebody did something stupid, which happened, pretty much on a weekly basis. But to your point is, you can be so beautifully, and to the last presentation, you can be so beautifully creative about advertising where it is entertainment. And we make sure inside of our company that there is so much respect for the people who work with us and who choose to put their dollars with us. Like, every advertiser has a choice of 1,000 agencies and hundreds of thousands of publishers.
Everybody write that down.
And look, you make the right trade-offs. Dave, I was talking to Dave on the way here today. We have a big campaign with a CPG advertiser who I never, ever, ever thought we would work with, ever. And they're not running on Twitter right now. This company in the Midwest has decided not to run on Twitter, which I think is kind of stupid, but whatever. I don't run a CPG company. So, and they have a huge spend on the line with us for the Super Bowl. We're doing a mini golf pro-am at the Super Bowl. And the question from the salespeople is, will we take their money if it means we can't broadcast the pro-am on Twitter? And for anyone who follows Barstool knows we live on Twitter. And I was like, we absolutely will not broadcast this on Twitter because, one, Twitter's kind of meager compared to all the other social platforms. We have our own broadcast channel with Barstool TV and obviously YouTube, but it was the right thing to do for that ad partner. And it will impact our editorial, but that's the right kind of relationship. If somebody's gonna pay for you to do something, like, not only do you give them the respect, not only do you make their creative better than they would make it themselves, but you also need to be willing to wrap yourselves around them the way they wrap themselves around you.
You mentioned working 24/7 for the last 6 years to accomplish things like that. Do you see at a point with a lot of the Barstool employees that becomes unsustainable, or is there a place where you recommend to people like, look, this is what you're going to have to do to get to this place, but then it's going to pay off?
I think I'm a little bit of a psycho. Like, I've gotten the feedback that, like, when I'm on the subway, I just tend to slack everyone. I'm like spray and pray like a machine gun, like, which isn't a good thing to do because it's early in the morning and it's late at night. But I really care. I'm so passionate. I'm so curious about what we're doing. It's so alive. And I think everyone's job can feel alive. There's something about your job that, like, you really get after and you're so excited about. I try to be really transparent. I got in a lot of trouble in the New York Times where I was talking to a reporter and the reporter was like, well, how do you interview people? And I was like, oh, I text them on the weekend. And we'll see how long it takes for them to respond. And people are like, you are an asshole. And you know what? I sounded like an asshole. So, like, I get why people would say that. But the reason that was important to me is at the time at Barstool Sports, we were following the sports schedule and the internet, which is, as you guys know, 24/7. And usually at Barstool, when things go wrong, it's late at night and it's on a weekend. And if you don't want that, I'm so cool with that. Like, that's great. I totally understand why someone wouldn't want to do that. And it's not every weekend, but when it happens, I needed to know, like, you could rock that and you would be there, because if you wouldn't, it would be bad for you and it's bad for us. So look, like, I think there's a whole bunch on, like, bring your whole self to work and work-life balance. And I think all of that is so important. It's important to have boundaries. It's important to take care of yourself. You're not going to work 24/7. I feel like we work 24/7 because we're in a startup. We're trying to build something, and it was do or die. But you can have great passion and have a 24/7 commitment in your heart to your job and in your mind and in your thinking. And it may just manifest itself 9 to 5 or 8 to 10 or whatever that may be. But I think you've got to give yourself to work to get something out of work. And Like the quiet quitting thing. I don't know how you guys feel about quiet quitting, but like quiet quitting to me is like you're just really quitting yourself. Half the people
Struck a chord.
half the people here are like, screw you, get her off the stage.
I think, believe it or not, that more than half the people in this room would agree with you. Where, you're dealing with, we did actually, people raised their hands, and like most of the people in this room are under 31 and a half
Okay,
years old.
that's
It's a
amazing.
random point, but
Yeah.
it made sense in that guy's presentation. The reason I bring it up is because there are a lot of young people here. I know that you have a lot of young people who work at Barstool. So where do you place on the hierarchy between like a career growth versus taking that step back or trying to put that balance into place? So when you were working through Microsoft, you were working through AOL, what was the focus, and at what point did it become more about the money or more about the transition to balance versus I need to get my career to a certain place?
I think it's so hard. I guess I would say like your head can get in a pretzel about your career. Like I think everybody's head can get in a pretzel about it. And it's like, you gotta stop thinking about your career. Like one, your career is gonna be really long. Two, hopefully it's gonna take you to places where you're like, how the hell did I end up here? And that's a good thing. And three, it's like, you can't control it. Like you can't control where exactly you're gonna be 5 years from now. I always needed money. So when I got out of college, I had a lot of college debt and I had to work and I wanted to just make more money. And I was like, hey, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I will outwork. My strategy was like, I'll outlisten, I'll outwork, and I'll out-hustle everyone here to move my way up. And I was opportunistic. So when I was on the agency side, I would have a job, I would have a team, I'd stay there for 2 years, and then I'd find the next agency in town, which also people probably don't want me to say here, and go get the job over there. What I was really worried about, I worked in Boston, and I was worried the higher I climbed up the pyramid, the less jobs there were. And I was always so afraid of not having a job. There's some insecurity, I think, in most successful people. Including probably most everyone here, of like, they're not gonna want me, or I'm not gonna have a job. And I needed to have a job. So I moved, that was really the impetus for me to move to New York, because I was like, I love Boston, but I'm becoming like, it's getting to be like rare air up here, and there's no place for me to go. So I think you should, every job I took, I always wanted 5 more jobs or 5 more opportunities to do new things. And look, like you have a life along the way. You get married, you have kids, you have a serious other, your parents get sick, like shit happens. And if you've worked really hard and given yourself to a place and done good work, that place is gonna be accommodating of those things and where you are. And I don't think you have to have one or the other. And I don't think at a certain point in time, you're like the jet fuel kicks in and you're gonna crazy accelerate your career. I think you have to be deliberate. You have to have that vision. Like, what's your job here?
I'm a director of strategy.
All right, so you're like, I'm gonna crush being a director of strategy. My vision as a director of strategy is to do blank. Do you have people that report to you?
I do.
Okay, so like they should know your vision, they should have a vision, and then you guys gotta just execute the shit out of it. If you do that, who's your boss in the room?
Yeah, she's back there somewhere.
Oh, I love that you have a lady boss.
We have a lot of lady bosses.
That's awesome. Everyone should have a lady boss.
Josh agrees. He says girls are smarter than guys.
That's probably true, but at least from my experience, that's just our place. But if you do that, good things are going to happen. And every once in a while, I would say the 2 best career moves I ever. Can I keep going, or is this boring? Okay.
None of this is gonna be boring.
Oh, okay, fine. These guys were bored. They were like, drinks. But the 2 best career moves I made, I was on a track to be a lawyer. I had this big job at Fidelity Investments. I made $50,000 a year, which was for me an exorbitant amount of money. I still think that's a lot of money. And I hated it. I was bored. I was like going out and getting drunk every night with my friends. I would get my work done in like 17 minutes. I had a big office. And then I would just email my girlfriends about what we did the night before and like make stories up about it. And I wanted a job. There was an ad group at Fidelity, and they had Discovery. Discovery Networks was big back then, and Discovery always sent these like big stuffed animal toys that were like sitting on the desks. And I was like, oh my God, this looks so fun. I want that job. So I went to the HR people at Fidelity, and I was like, I really want to transfer to the ad group. And they were like, you're an idiot. Why would you do that? You're actually an idiot. And the ad group job, it was a media planning job, and the interactive group, which didn't exist, it was one person. And it made $17,000. And I took the job and racked up so much credit card debt. It was insane because I still was living my $50,000 lifestyle, which was stupid. But it was the single best thing I ever did. Truly the single best thing I ever did. Because it opened the internet to me. And it could have been a disastrous mistake. And the thing with life is that you can take a big jump. People are optimists. So even if you make the stupidest decision ever, you're going to be like, that was good. And that's just the reality. And it was good. And then the second time I did it was when I left the CMO job at AOL and I went to Backstage, which was a disaster. Like, wasn't a good company, wasn't a good experience. But I would not have gotten the Barstool job had I not done that. And I, again, took a crazy pay cut, moved across the country, but it was the right thing to do.
So I've got a girl boss. A lot of people here have girl bosses, which
Okay.
is great. You and Dave, and I understand Hank is moving his way up the corporate ladder
Corporate
now.
Hank,
Yeah, corporate Hank. All those people are so visible in your company that has gone from 12 to 400 people. And I can imagine that you guys feel very accessible to your staff, and that may not always be the best thing for you getting your shit done during the day. So what I am curious about is how you feel in terms of people communicating with their bosses, right? In terms of reaching out and trying to make themselves visible to their, whether it's their boss or their boss's boss, trying to get in touch with their leadership and make themselves known without
Annoying
obviously
them.
pestering.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm a big open door person. I love talking to people. I'm not good with middle management. Like, I just want to be with the person making whatever the thing is so I can learn the most about the thing, which isn't a great quality.
You hear that, Josh? That's not a great quality.
It's not a great quality. But here's what I would say about it is I think that if you're looking for time with your boss or your boss's boss, one is just be proactive and use less words. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, I've got a guy at Barstool who's kind of struggling right now. He's not crushing it. He's not organized, doesn't have a vision, he's not getting shit done. And he's hiding. And I know he's hiding, and he knows I know he's hiding, but he's hiding. And I'm like, I'm just gonna sit here and wait you out. But I wish this person, and in general, I think this is a good thing to do, is like, just be proactive. You know if your boss is stressed. You know if your boss is into what you're doing or not into what you're doing. You generally pay attention. One of my big things is like listen at work. Just like listen to what people talk about at work. You know what your boss cares about, stressed about, needs, what they're worried about with their boss, and be proactive. So, my thing on that is send an email every week that's like, here's the 10 things I'm working on, here's the 2 things I'm struggling with, and here's the 3 places I need help. Write the email and then cut 40% of the words out of it. Like, just literally, I hate when people send me paragraphs. I'm like, just send me a Slack. Like, that's how we're moving so fast. So I think the biggest thing, and I'm probably not doing a very good job answering this question, is make the most of your boss's time. Be succinct, be clear, and be proactive, and offer them something. Offer them a nugget, offer them a perspective, offer them an idea. And I think bosses will always appreciate that. What I hate is when people are like, hey, can I have some time? And then I'll be like, what do you want? And they're like, And I'm like, all right, well, like, let's move it on. So like, whether you rehearse the script in your head of 5 minutes in somebody's office or in their cube, or you're sending the email or you're sending the Slack, be consistent, be concise, be proactive with it.
That's a terrific answer. To follow up with it, when people have an understanding of whether their boss likes what they're doing or not. Like, to your point, how do you suggest people go about evaluating what that's worth, right? As you come up to, I'm negotiating for a raise, and I'm thinking that I deserve this, right? I think that my boss likes me.
Yep.
I cut 40% out of this email, and I
Yep.
only bother them on Tuesdays,
Yep.
right? Whatever it is, what do you recommend for that employee?
Yeah, okay. So it's always awkward to ask for money. Don't ask too early. I think the biggest thing is don't ask too early. So if you have a vision, you should be sharing your vision with your boss. And then you should be like, here's how I'm doing against my vision. And your vision might be small, and you may think it's stupid, but it's probably not stupid. But you've got to show results. I think when people tend to go and ask for money, they tend to talk about themselves. Me, this. Your boss doesn't give a fuck about you. Your boss is like, what are you doing for this company? I mean, they do, but what are you doing for this company? How are you delivering results? How are you making my job easier, better, bigger? So put yourself in the context of not just why you need more money or deserve more money. It's, this is what I've accomplished, and this is the result of that, and this is what I'm endeavoring to do next, and this is what I'm passionate about. That's motivating. And then I think you can say, and I'm really looking to, I'm going to invest in this company to do these things, or in this team, or in this relationship. And I'm really looking for the company to invest back in me. And I want to understand, like, are we in sync on that? And your boss may be like, ooh, there's no raises this year, or there's no bonus, or I think you stink. And then you have to, if your boss is not down with what you're doing, you need to challenge your boss on it. You need to be like, well, why? Give me examples. Most managers are quite passive. They're not great communicators, and they're kind of weak. So if you have a manager who's not teaching you, or not training you, or not inspiring you, or not pushing you, like your manager should push you. And if your manager's not doing that, you should get a different manager. So if that's happening, don't just take it. Like, you're like, hey, I deserve more, then like advocate for, what do I need to be doing? How do you think I could do this differently? You don't have to be a jerk about it, but have a real conversation about what's your expectation, what's my expectation, and are they congruous? Because the reality at work is, like, where most of it gets screwed up is somebody has this expectation and somebody has that expectation, and you never really talk about it, and then everybody's unhappy. And then you just sit and bitch about it, and it's like annoying.
Right. So to that, the sitting and the bitching about it.
Yeah.
Right? Is that something you guys encounter? I mean, you guys are kind of on camera a lot, but is it something you encounter? And in your experience with it, like when you catch it, how do you react to it?
I hate that. I think that what's really nice about Barstool is we're not very hierarchical. And we have too much work to do. So there's not a lot of time to like sit and bitch. And the other thing is, like, Barstool, it's the pirate ship. It was us against the world, and nobody is coming to help us. So if we weren't going to fix the DNA and the culture inside of Barstool, is like, if you're not helping fix us, then you shouldn't be with us. Now, that doesn't mean people don't get mad at each other. People get mad at each other all day long, and it's super public at Barstool. But I think the sitting and bitching is like, look, it's just a waste of your time. It's like negative. It's like, there's like, it's like skills for adolescents. Like, positivity is contagious, and so is negativity. And you have a choice every day when you go to work. One of the things when I hated the CMO job, I was finding that I was like sitting around like just like, and I was like, I hate myself at the end of it. It's like when you scroll on TikTok for too long and then you're like, oh, I hate myself. Like, what have I done with like 3 hours of my life? It's the same thing. And my thing was like, I work super hard. I have a family, like, I want to get home. So I'm like, I don't want to spend 2 hours of my day mired in negativity about how so-and-so sucks. It's like, I know they suck, they suck. What are we going to do about them sucking? You know what I mean? And so I think that it's a choice. And every day, every single one of us has a choice of like, how much are you going to get out of work? For your life, for your bank account, for your experience, like, it's a choice. And the choice is like, are you gonna like make shit happen? Or are you just gonna ride along and try to be invisible and, hope you just stay along for the ride, or are you going to be a cancer? And eventually, like, it's just not fun to be a cancer.
Is there, like, just hard pivot? What's the thing that Dave did that made your job the hardest?
Oh, I mean,
If you had to, or you can pick a top three.
what did Dave do that?
Talk, maybe. Blog,
Yeah. I love working with Dave. I really do. Like, Dave's the best person I've ever worked with. I hope I work with Dave for the rest of my life. What Dave does that's hard is he just moves very fast and he's very erratic. So it can happen at any time and things just happen. So, but I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, but it is stressful. So, Dave put out a tweet that, it was Christmas Eve, and Dave was like, we're gonna create a charity. And Dave doesn't know anything about charity. And we're gonna give away money to small businesses. And I'm like, I love it. I need like 24 hours. It's Christmas Eve. Like, I need 24 hours to like find a 501(c) and figure out a submission form, because it was gonna kill the company to try to make it happen. Or we did the same thing with Barstool athletes. Dave puts out a tweet and is like, hey, you want to be a Barstool athlete? And 150,000 kids said yes. But then we had to build the Google submission form, and we were trying to post them every 5 minutes on Instagram, and the Instagram kept crashing, and they thought we were a bot. So those things are hard, but he has a Pied Piperness to him that makes it electric. And I think, look, like, visionary people are hard. They're erratic, they can be volatile, they're not great collaborators always, but it gives you something really interesting to do every day. And so that's kind of how I think about that.
Is there a point when you started where it was hard for him to relinquish some of the control, or was he immediately like, get this off my fucking plate?
No, it was so funny. Does anyone here read The Skim? Did you guys ever read The Skim? Skim kind of went by the wayside, right? Yeah, I think so too. So I remember talking to the Skim founders at the same time I was talking to Dave. And I could tell that the Skim founders wanted so much control. Like, I could tell that whoever came in there that wasn't a founder, they're just gonna kill. And most founders are like that. Arianna Huffington was like that. We bought the HuffPost when I was at AOL. I just basically watched Arianna Huffington kill smart young people. But most founders are like that. When you see a startup and you see that there's going to be a business person brought in with the founder, creative person, it usually doesn't go very well, because the business person or the creative person, exactly to your point, is like, no, this is mine. And that was what I interviewed Dave for. So that's the other thing. Like, when you're interviewing for a job, you're interviewing the person as much as they're interviewing you. But my thing was like, everyone was like, this guy's a terrorist and a psycho, hates women, and you're gonna go like work there? And I was like, oh, I'm totally gonna go work there. But the reason is that Dave is humble, and he knew what he didn't know. And he really didn't. He was kind of lost in this business. He was like, I don't want to manage these people. I don't know how to deal with this stuff. I want to do pizza reviews. Like, we hadn't even started pizza reviews yet. Like, he's like, I want to go do pizza reviews. And I was like, that seems like a great use of time. Like, I'll go do the rest of this. But you got to find, it is a hard thing. And I think it's hard at work too. Like, we have a lot of managers like this at Barstool, like people who want the iron fist of control on everything. That sucks. Like, that's kind of like every 6 months are you doing something different? Like, those people who can't let go aren't ever going to take on anything else, and they're never going to be uncomfortable, and they're not going to fail, and then they're not going to get bigger, and you end up in the same place. And what I really loved about Dave, and what I've loved about our journey, and what's weird about us, is that because we respected what each other did and had zero interest in doing either part of that, it actually made us like twice as big, and then 5 times as big, and then 10 times as big, and then 1,000 times as big. So you've got to, if you want to bring in someone who doesn't push you and doesn't compliment you and doesn't grow what you're in totality capable of, you're never really going to grow. And it's actually not going to be that interesting.
Do we have time for one more question? I can't see anybody back there. Somebody just yell if I have time for one more. But cool. Can you tell me what your favorite moment of being a leader has been for this company? Again, you were in charge of 11 other people and now 399
Yeah.
other people. What's your,
Oh.
just one or 5? I don't care.
I think you said it, like the average age being 31. Like, I love 20-somethings and 30-somethings. Like, I love these people. They're so smart and they're so weird and they're so flawed and they want to believe in something. And, I remember does anyone know Devlin? Do you guys know Devlin? Devlin does Rough and Rowdy. He was an intern in the old days. Devlin, I remember catching we had one office that was one floor, and I shared the office with like 5 of them. And we'd hired Devlin back as an intern for free. And it was like a 4-degree day in New York City, and Devlin was wearing basketball shorts and a pair of loafers, and when the bottom of the loafer like just rips off, and then it's like, they were Dave's loafers from 2006 that Dave gave them, Dave Devlin. And I was like, Devlin, it's like fucking freezing outside. Like, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't have any money. And Dave gave me these shoes, and they're like my only pair of shoes. And I remember I went home that night and bought like 5 pairs of sneakers and online and had them sent to work and got all my husband's clothes and then was like, I'm going to give these to Devlin. And since then, Devlin eats half of my lunch every day, which is sick. It's disgusting. Like, even during COVID, I was like, I've kind of spit on this, and it's a salad. And he's like, that's okay, I'll eat it. But which is really gross. And I'm going to be like Cher. I'm going to be alive at like the end of the earth just from the amount of germs in Barstool Sports. But it's stuff like that where it's like the human thing where you can have such a profound impact on someone by believing in them. And, when I got to Barstool, nobody believed in them. They were made to feel, and because they offended everyone, that they were kind of shit and they weren't ever going to be big. And, even to this day, Big Cat's like, you changed my life. And it's like, but he changed my life, So I think that it's just being part of something where you have a common objective and you're working towards something, but there's also like the human side of it. And I think that's why I'll never love a place, because it's just that authentic and honest. Like, I don't know how many CEOs are going up to the Devlins of the world and being like, I notice you're in basketball shorts in the mid of winter and with no shoes. But it's also really unique that Devlin was totally honest and was like, yeah, I need clothes. So that kind of thing, I think that's what makes work great. It just gives you opportunity to help people.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Erika.
Thank you, guys.
Erika Ayers, everybody.